true north star of professional wrestling, Calgary, Alberta, Canada. This is Wrestling is for Losers, a podcast that's not fake, it's predetermined. What's up, losers? It's me, Shoe Boots, and we are back for our second episode of Wrestling is for Losers. On tonight's show, we're talking about brand splits on the big two promotions, and we're going to review this week's episode of AEW Dynamite. But before I go any deeper into any of that, let's introduce our other two hosts. First of all, if you heard the first episode, you know he's new to wrestling, but he's not new to our hearts. It's Koltrane.
Hey, Shoe Boots. Oh, man, I'm so excited. I watched wrestling for the first time in over 30 years. 30 years. And I finally watched wrestling, and I have some opinions. There's some things I absolutely loved, and there's some things I didn't like so much. So it'll be kind of interesting to see how it's evolved, how it's changed, and what has stayed the same over the last 30 years. So I can't wait for the show.
I don't want to put the cart before the horse, so I'm going to hold my any thoughts on this episode of Dynamite. Instead, let's jump third, if you count me, to our third host. He is an WWE shill and an AEW hater. It is Texas Crazy Horse.
Steve, did you hear that? It's me not hitting my keyboard during a podcast. It's just a matter of time before I get smart enough. I can leave you two jabronis and start a podcast with a true Canadian hero, the Canadian Goose. And our podcast would be named The Wrestling Flock. But until then, I'll just stick with you two losers.
Excellent. Perfect.
Okay. Yeah, we sassed Tex a little bit on some audio issues since he's such a noob. And after this episode, we'll probably talk to him about framing his head in the shot. But I think you moved a little bit since I framed it. Sorry. But that's okay. If you're listening to this on audio, it doesn't matter. Okay, tonight, folks, is our first, it's our second episode, but our first episode was really sort of introducing a premise. So this is going to be our first kind of normal episode, hopefully. We'll see what happens. But tonight we're going to talk about AEW Dynamite. We're going to review the April 19th show through the lens of Coltrane's first Dynamite episode ever, and as he said, first wrestling show in 30 years. I'm sure Tex is going to have some hot takes, and I certainly have a lot to say about this episode. But before we jump into that, let's take a quick news at a couple big headlines in wrestling this week. Sorry, lost my spot. I got to fix this. So two big stories, in my opinion, one from each top promotion. Both are actually kind of similar in that they're both concerning a brand split in a few different ways. Now, Koltrane, are you familiar with the idea of a brand split?
I am not. I have no idea what this means.
So a brand split is when a promotion takes their roster, splits them in half, and has them on different programs. And it can be a soft split where people kind of go back and forth as needed, or it can be like a rigid split where they actually like the WWE. Well, let's get into it. I'll explain what the WWE does because our first story is the draft is back in the WWE for the first time in a year and a half. And the first time since Triple H has assumed alleged creative control over narrative, WWE will be having a draft between Raw and SmackDown. The draft begins on April 28th on SmackDown and concludes May 1st. So a brand split, Colt, is if it's not as straightforward as it might sound, the idea is that in kayfabe, WWE has two brands, Raw and SmackDown, that are sort of competing programs. And they are actually going to, on their show, have a draft where they draft wrestlers to each show and basically rejig their brand split. And they and the wrestlers will be on their own show, and they have and they only wrestle on the one show, and they only wrestle wrestlers on their show, asterisk. But that's the idea. Now,
so is it kind of like Red Rover send Triple H on over? Like, is that how it's set up? How do they switch them across?
It's
is it drawn out of a hat?
Most of the drafts have happened during my hiatus, so I can't say I've witnessed a ton of them firsthand. but generally they kind of change up from time to time.
Mm.
And one of the big criticisms of the draft over WWE's history is they don't really adhere to the rules that they make. Like they'll do a
Right.
draft, and then whenever it's convenient, they'll just move someone or whatever. But what they've done in the last year and a half is they did a draft a year and a half ago, and since then, slowly but surely, it's sort of evaporated to the point that like all the people sort of freely go to whatever show they want, depending on the narrative. And yeah, they have kind of a home brand, but they don't really enforce it. And I think the feedback's
Interesting.
generally been positive, so I'm actually a little surprised that they're going to do a draft again. But Tex, what are your thoughts on the brand split, the draft coming back to WWE?
I think it's a good thing if they actually follow the rules. Like you said, they mostly follow it for like a month or two, and then they're like, "All right, whatever, move on." Um, and if you remember when it originally started, is when the WWE bought WCW,
Mm-hmm.
and it had way too many wrestlers, and it's a good way to uh, create different stories because it's two different shows. And also, when you do have a draft, switching shows, you can more fresh competition. You're not fighting the same person every time. But that's if they actually follow the rules and stick with it.
Mm-hmm.
I have a quick question. Do the different shows have higher ratings than the other? Is one
Yes.
more popular than the other?
Generally,
Yeah.
yes. SmackDown is more popular, but there's sort of an asterisk beside that because SmackDown is on Fox, which is in way more households than the USA Network, which is a cable network.
Right.
So there's always a debate. Is it because one is on just a channel that everybody in America gets, or is it because it's a truly better product?
Right. And then when these wrestlers go over to say the Fox network, are they're getting new exposure and gaining more popularity because there's more eyeballs on them? Like, so that's got to be good, I would assume, for the wrestlers to switch it up. It keeps it fresh for the audience and more exposure.
Text?
Yeah. Yes. And the good thing is for the middle card guys that if there was only one show or there wasn't a split, they wouldn't get as much ring time or
Mm.
time on the screen. They actually get to show what they got, and it would be better if there was two belts, one belt for each show,
Right.
which I don't know if they're going to do or not.
Right. So this is the big question. Traditionally, Colt, what they've done is when they do a brand split, they've got belts for different networks. So in a way, there's sort of two world championships. There's one on Raw and there's one on SmackDown. For the last little bit more than a year, so in WrestleMania 38 in 2022, they did a title versus title, and the two championships were against each other. So Roman Reigns won that, and now he has both belts. He's now so they call him the undisputed champion, and he'll come out wearing two belts. So the big question is, and something we could talk about and speculate on right now, will they split the belts back up, and or should they split the belts back up? Because yes, if you have one champion, it's problematic. And what we hear from the pundits is that the networks do complain when there's no champion on their show, because Roman Reigns traditionally is a SmackDown guy, although he's gone back and forth when hyping certain things. But he's holding Raw's belt. So what do you do there? Now
It is tricky because you can't beat them for one belt because then whoever beats them for the next belt loses some of that hype they would get. Then if you just take it from them, it's kind of like lame. I don't know what they're gonna do. I
So
don't think they know either.
yeah, it's hard to say if they know. I hope they know. I think that comes down to whether or not this draft is Vince's idea or Triple H's idea, which I can't remember if we covered this last week, Koltrane, but there's a lot of concern on who's actually running the storyline at WWE these days. Is it old man Vince, who basically hasn't, in most people's opinion, has not been making good stories for years now? Or is it Triple H, who has breathed fresh air into the WWE storyline, and it's better than it's been in a very long time? And it's been unclear since Vince reinstalled himself as leader, as chairman of the company, if he's running things or not. And there's a lot of people getting a lot of clicks on YouTube speculating on what the situation is there.
Right. A lot of thumbnails and a lot of like, whoa, big reaction and that kind of stuff.
And it helps that Vince McMahon decided to grow a bad guy pencil mustache and dye his hair black.
Oh, that's not fake? I swear I thought that was fake.
It's real, dude.
Oh,
I thought it was fake too till he appeared on like Bloomberg Network looking like that.
Right. That's awesome. But that's interesting too about the belts, because I noticed on AEW Dynamite they had like the TNT champion, like the TNT belt champion.
Yeah. So most promotions will have their world championship, whatever they call that.
Yeah.
Which in AEW is MJF right now. And then there'll be what you might call mid-card belts or workhorse belts. So these are belts that basically are for the top tier wrestlers. Generally are not competing for them. They are meant to give storyline to the up and comers or kind of like the mid-range wrestlers, I guess you could say.
Would that be like back in the day? They would have like the world champion, then they would have the intercontinental champion.
Yeah, they still do have the intercontinental champion. That belt is still around. It is the it is the SmackDown mid-card belt now.
Really? Oh, that's awesome. Okay. All right.
Yeah, that is probably the most storied belt in wrestling history. Has the greatest. If you look at the list of wrestlers who have held that belt, it probably has the best resume, even more than the WWE Championship, in my opinion.
One thing I've noticed is whenever you get hit by the belt, whenever it's used as a weapon, it always hurts the most. Like that puts you on the mat. You know what I mean?
If I can raise the $800 Canadian that it costs to buy a replica WWE belt, I will hit myself with it on this show.
Perfect.
And we will test that theory.
We will test it out. Right. Tex and I will fly out to Canada. We will smack you right in the face. With an intercontinental belt and see you hit the floor. We'll see if it works.
Hey, if you're going to Double or Nothing and have the belt, bring it with you. And if we drink enough, who knows what might be consented to.
Right. With the Canadian Goose, you never know.
So yeah, that's the big question. Is this gonna? Now, my thoughts on it is I actually think a brand split is fine, and I really like the way Triple H has been doing it in that it's loosey goosey. It's not official. You never and I think what's brilliant about that, I might be being generous with the word brilliant, but what's good about that is that you never let the gimmick get in the way of the story. So if this guy has on Raw has a feud with this guy on SmackDown, they can go over. As long as you kind of keep a general sense of what the divide is. And to Tex's point, you have to kind of be transparent in the rules that's kind of how it is too, that like these are separate brands. But what they've done in the past is kind of define it much more rigidly and then be loose with it, which doesn't feel right. The other reason I think it's a really good idea is because I like having one world championship. I think that when there's two world championships, it cheapens both of them. And it brings this question of, well, who is the world champion? You know, it used to be that the greatest event of the year in all of wrestling, the Royal Rumble, the winner gets to challenge for the WWE Championship. But now the winner gets to decide who they will challenge for the WWE Championship, which just kind of like puts a little bit of meh in it, in my opinion. I like one champ, and the only way you can do that with the brand split is if you're letting people go back and forth, because they're going to have to appear on both networks regularly, both shows regularly, which is not currently the case, but that's another thing to argue about some other time. Lastly, the one point I wanted to bring up from my notes is I think it's really good for the wrestlers. WWE in particular has a very difficult schedule for these wrestlers. They work a lot. And when you have a brand split, it allows them to just stay home for a couple days when they would otherwise be on the road. There's 2 shows a week, but they're doing house shows every week. There's it's a very difficult schedule for them. And when wrestlers give interviews about why they chose to go to AEW, in many cases, they'll refer to the lighter schedule and that it allows them a better quality of life. With more personal time. So
interesting. Well, I'll tell you, and that was a big thing watching today, especially being older, because now, I'm kind of an old man, right? So now I hurt. When someone is getting thrown into like a steel aluminum staircase, before I used to be like, oh, that's awesome. Now I'm like, ooh, boy, that
wasn't a good one.
Yeah, he's going to feel that one. Or, I'm watching it under a different lens now, like, oh, that's going to hurt. But so it is interesting that WWE has such a much more hardcore schedule. AEW is a little bit more lax on it. Tex, do you agree about these 2 world championships? I think that that's a really interesting point. If there are 2 champions, do they kind of cancel each other out? Is it still good to you? What do you think?
I think you need 2 championships for both shows, and I think it creates the story, eventually when they meet and they wrestle each other. That's always like the biggest ones when
Right.
Brock and Roman did it. It was huge because they're both champs. Um, it's just when they're both when the belts are on the line though, it's a little rough. I do think they need to keep them separate, and it gives more mid card guys chance to fight for the belt instead of just one person at a time. It's 2 people at a time,
No,
and who can
I agree. I
go
agree
for
with
it.
you there. That more belts is generally good for the larger product. I would just personally rather see other belts than a world champion belt. But let me ask you this: what would you? So considering the current dilemma they have, let's say that they're going to split the belts up. What's the play? What do they do? Roman's holding both of them.
All right, so this is not my take. I stole it from somewhere. I don't know who it was. The best way to do it is a triple threat match, and the first 2 pins get a belt. So someone pins someone else, gets a belt, and then Roman pins
Okay.
and gets a belt.
So like they're going to actually like have a stipulation in the match designed to divide the championships up.
I think that's the best way to do it.
Okay.
That way Roman doesn't lose, and you don't cheapen the belt by just taking it off of him.
God, Roman. I can't wait till we have. It's not the right time, but I can't wait till we get into it about Roman Reigns. Okay.
More like Roman Lames? Is that what you're thinking? My goodness. Right.
He's. I mean, I'm sure he's a nice guy. I don't blame him because WWE generally those wrestlers don't write their own stories. There's a writing team that does, so it's not on him. But I am not a fan of the writing with his storyline at the moment. Anyway, let's jump to the AEW news. Believe it or not, it is about CM Punk. Can you believe this?
Shocker.
What?
Shocker.
More CM Punk news. Wrestling Observer is reporting that plans are in place for CM Punk to make his long-awaited return to AEW on Saturday, June 17th, in his hometown of Chicago, on the first episode of the rumored new Saturday show AEW Collision. It is believed that CM Punk will be the anchor of this show, possibly with the Jericho Appreciation Society, while the Elite would anchor the Dynamite show with Blackpool Combat Club. It is rumored that some sort of brand split will result, but it is unclear at this point if the split would be official, like the WWE, or a softer split that is sort of a behind-the-scenes split, where wrestlers come and go as story requires. So I'm tempted to throw it to Koltrane, but we haven't. I want to save it for our AEW.
Sure.
So I'll start this one. First of all, I have a bias here because for the first time ever, AEW is coming to Calgary, and they are coming on a Saturday in July, and it's a house show. And Coltrane, if you don't know what a house show is, it's a non-televised show.
Oh,
It is not canon necessarily.
So what happens at the house show stays at the house show, essentially?
Essentially, there's been rare occasions where a belt has usually accidentally changed hands, in which they have to make it kayfabe. But
wow,
it happened once in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. But I
have to ask, does Canada host a lot of these house shows, Boots? Because it's making me sound like Canada might not be the premier destination.
No. So check it out.
For wrestling.
Calgary is a wrestling mecca. So everyone was kind of shocked, especially since not only is it a house show in Calgary, but all the surrounding cities in the Western Canada Tour, which have lower population counts than Calgary, and 0 Hart families have gotten televised shows. Calgary's the only one that didn't, but it's on a Saturday. And there's another city in Western Canada, a very small city called, let me pronounce this correctly, Regina, Saskatchewan. And they are getting a Saturday show the Saturday before our show, and their poster says an as yet unannounced televised event.
Oh my gosh. All right.
So-
All right. Okay.
So we got 2 Saturdays there. We've got all the supposed like reporters saying that there's not only do we know AEW is bringing a show, we know it's going to be on Saturday, and we know they're going to call it Collision. So they're pretty confident. So I'm pretty confident that the AEW house show in Calgary is actually a Collision show in disguise. And another reason why I think that is if you go to the floor plan on the ticket site, it is set up for television, whereas other house shows are not. And it is in the Saddle Dome, the biggest arena in Calgary. And it is on the last weekend of what we all know to be the greatest outdoor show on earth, the Calgary Stampede. It is a huge event.
Huge.
You don't do a house show at the Stampede.
This is the Stampede.
It's the greatest outdoor show on earth.
I've heard about the Stampede so much. My gosh, my whole family, we grew up watching and talking about the Stampede in Calgary. It's unbelievable. What the heck is the Calgary Stampede, Boots? What is this?
It's the greatest. It's
the greatest Stampede on earth.
Imagine if you took upper middle class people and put them all in cowboy hats and got them really drunk for 10 days straight, and then added a rodeo and a carnival and a concert that has the most popular acts from 15 years ago.
Wow.
You're talking about Dallas.
Right. So Dallas then, right.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's a big event. It's actually, there's if you're ever going to visit Calgary, you should visit during the Stampede, because there's Stampede breakfasts where all the companies in town, they come out and they set up griddles on the sidewalk, and they'll make you free pancakes. You can just walk around Calgary and get free pancakes for a week.
No kidding. Like in the city, or no, it's probably on Stampede grounds.
No, it's every business has to have their Stampede breakfast. And
You're
I think
kidding.
There's even I don't know if it's still around. At one point, there was an app that would tabulate all the breakfasts, and you could rate them, and you could plan each morning for where you were going to hit.
Oh my! I gotta admit, this sounds amazing. To be honest. Oh my gosh, man! Could Canada be the greatest place on earth? I mean, it's the wrestling capital of the world, according to you, Boots.
Well, no,
so there you go.
I can attest that Calgary is definitely not the greatest place on earth, but
right.
that is like the little thing that we cling to that makes us special. Like
That's awesome.
Like all cities do that aren't major household name metropolises. Okay, so let's get into this. Is a brand split right for AEW? I think the answer depends on whether or not it's true, or how much truth there is to the idea that this is to keep CM Punk separate from the Elite. Like, is it just because we need to keep them separate? Like, and you'll see people argue of like, well, these guys, they should just make up, be professional. Like, this is wrestling. Come on, get it together. And I got to be honest, there's a part of me that absolutely agrees with that, because I think I want to see CM Punk versus Kenny Omega. I want to see FTR and CM Punk versus the Elite. Like, I want to see those things. But I also know that there actually could be legal implications. They might not legally be allowed to be around each other at the moment. But either way, I think that, I mean, the question is, would they have done this if this issue wasn't an issue? Would they be doing a split? And are they doing a split? Tex, what do you think? Like, do you think they're doing a split? Do you think they should be doing a split? What should that split look like for AEW?
So I was looking online, and again, I'm making these numbers up. There's over 100 wrestlers on that they have signed, so they need to split them up, because you can only fit 15 wrestlers on a night, give or take.
They do have a big roster at the moment.
This way, they can actually use their whole roster. The thing that's interesting to me, if CM Punk is on Saturday, how is the Elite going to feel if Saturday the ratings are outrageous, but on Wednesday they're not?
Ooh.
I don't know. I think that ratings are a tricky thing, because so many people will hang their hat on ratings to predict whether a show is successful or not. When the fact of the matter is that I've been asking around ever since I decided to make this show, and I have yet to find a person in real life that watches any wrestling show on cable television.
Hmm.
They all go on the internet.
Right.
They all watch it on demand, which means none of anyone that I personally know, which admittedly is not a scientific number, but nobody that I personally know contributes in any way to those ratings, which makes me, I don't know who, I mean, obviously some people are watching on cable, but yeah, the general consensus, Colt, if you're probably not familiar, is both do generally well on cable, but WWE definitely does better, and you'll see a lot of people twisting those numbers trying to say that this one's good or this one's bad or whatever. But
right.
I don't really want to get too deep into a ratings discussion. That'd be a great topic for an episode, actually. But yeah, I don't know. I think that it's tough to say because most things that I've read have said like Saturday is kind of a interesting night because it's iconic. It's Saturday night. WWF has had major Saturday night shows in its time. So has WCW once upon a time.
Right.
So there's a nostalgic idea of picking Saturday night. However, it's a very difficult night to pick because one of the biggest detractors from ratings on any wrestling show is a big sports event. And so every sports event tries to put their best games on Saturday nights.
Do you think that AEW has, like Texas was just talking about how they have a big roster, right? A lot of wrestlers. But out of that roster, do they have enough stars to bring the ratings? Are there, because I'm not going to get ahead of myself, but there were some people I saw on Dynamite that I thought were like Omega stars, like, oh my gosh, this person is incredible. And others I was like, ugh, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think you're always going to take a hit when you split your brand. I mean,
right.
I think it's just common sense that if you pack a show with the best people you got, it's going to be better than if you make two shows and split the best people you got in half.
Right. Because you need your anchors, your anchor wrestlers. These are your big stars, but then you got to fill in the gaps.
I think at least in the short term, there is enough wrestlers. And I think that I think there's a lot of wrestlers, to Texas' point, in AEW and WWE for that matter, that don't really get their shot because there's not room for them right now.
Right.
And I think you're not really going to find out if they've got what it takes until you give them their shot. So
nice.
So another thing is technically this is what the third show because they have Dynamite, Rampage in this.
It's technically
but they also
their fifth
have
show if you think about it.
Yeah, they have a YouTube. They have Ring of Honor.
What's going to happen? Sixth if you count Ring of Honor.
What's going to happen to these other shows? That's another thing. And Saturday is kind of a weird day. But, I mean, if you're going off like the football season, which is when everything gets tanked rating-wise, I mean, that's every day of the week now. So, I don't know if Saturday's going to be worse or not.
Yeah.
You did say WWE had history with Saturdays. I don't think they never seem to really work out unless it's a pay-per-view or a big event.
Well, in the 80s, they had Saturday Night's Main Event, which aired on NBC in the Saturday Night Live slot whenever the Saturday Night Live was on break. So that was a big show because SNL was massive in the 80s. Not the early 80s, but by the late 80s it was.
Sure.
So, which isn't the same idea of what they're doing, but yeah, I don't know. There is a lot, and it's a fair criticism. There's a ton of wrestling on AEW, and I don't know anyone that watches all of it. You've got 2 YouTube shows. One's pretty short; it's like a half hour. One's a bit longer. It's kind of a developmental show. It's basically like it's mostly squash matches. Like it's not the kind of wrestling that interests me. It'll be like, oh, this wrestler that you know is wrestling this guy you've never heard of, and he's going to beat the guy you've never heard of. And that's basically all the matches. And there's a reason that they don't put that on television. I think it's really there for them to let their guys practice and maybe try out new people that they haven't seen before or whatever.
Right. See how they do. See how they, how athletic, if the crowd likes them.
Now
it's also it's a way to build up those fake records they have.
Yeah, I think if I don't remember the time, they've got 2 YouTube shows. I think one of them affects the records and one of them doesn't. Okay. So, Cole, if you're not familiar, AEW actually keeps track of its win-loss records and uses it to decide who is a contender for a belt.
Oh, wow.
Whereas WWE just decides. So, I mean, both of them are fake, but AEW, it presents a little bit more of a kayfabe legitimacy. But on the other hand, if they want to push someone, they're going to have to pad their record a bit if they've been losing for a while. So
True. Awesome.
yeah. So yeah, this could be interesting. I think this comes down to, if this is the way that they get CM Punk back and this is what the Elite demand, I think it's a good move. I think that, again, the same way I feel about WWE, I really hope this is a soft split and not a hard split. I realize that it might be that we've got CM Punk is always going to be here and the Elite are always going to be here. But otherwise, I would like to see people come and go. The Elite are feuding with the Blackpool Combat Club right now, so it makes sense to keep them together. If CM Punk's going to feud with Jericho, I can't remember off the top of my head if he's had a fight with Jericho in AEW yet. I don't think he has. He has in the WWE days, so that could be interesting. But I hope that, once those feuds play out, the people are moving around, because we still have yet to see a Jericho Omega feud in AEW, which I think a lot of people would like to see before Jericho retires. I certainly would. Anyway, I guess we're going to find out. Wrestling Observer seems to think that they're going to announce it very soon, potentially May 17th, a month before the show. But I guess we'll find out. That'll be interesting.
That's awesome.
Okay, enough of that. Let's move on to this week's topic, an intro to AEW with a review of Koltrane's first episode of AEW Dynamite. Now, we're going to talk about AEW Dynamite. I don't know if we're going to go through segment by segment. We'll see what time allows, but we're just going to start with some thoughts. Before I go into this, for those of you that didn't hear our first episode, or if you turned it on to do me a favor but weren't really paying attention, here's the shtick. For the next few weeks, we are going to specifically be reviewing AEW Dynamite, because Koltrane and I have bought tickets to Double or Nothing in Vegas at the end of May. So Koltrane is going to watch Dynamite. We're all going to watch Dynamite, but Coltrane's going to use this as getting his feet wet, learning about modern wrestling. We're going to review these episodes. We're going to use them to teach Koltrane about things like this week. We're going to be talking about factions, for example. And then we're going to go to the event and we're going to review it. And then from there, we'll probably make a bit of a pivot and look at some WWE stuff. But for now, it's going to be AEW heavy. You are welcome. Okay.
Right.
So Koltrane, I'm sure I know you have some questions, but I've been dying for this moment. You've watched it. It was an interesting episode, to say the least.
Right.
What are your initial impressions of AEW Dynamite?
My initial impressions of AEW Dynamite is I was pretty floored. And I was pretty excited. And there were parts of it that I absolutely loved, and parts of it I was like, ooh. But here's the thing that blew my mind, that at one point literally put tears in my eyes. Literal tears in my eyes. Is I felt like I was 8 years old, 10 years old again, because there's those moments that haven't changed in wrestling over 30 years. And those moments are these. It's that moment when it's a tag team match and the wrestlers struggling, they're getting beat up, and they're struggling. They're trying to get to tag in their friend, right? And in this case, it was Hayter. It was Jamie.
Oh, Colt, you muted yourself.
Thank you. Oh my gosh, right. So it was Jamie Hayter, who I love, by the way. I thought she was awesome. With the yellow towel and a Hater's Gonna Hate, thought it was great. But she was struggling to get to the corner to tag in, I think, the Dr. Baker or something.
Britt Baker, DMD.
Yes, exactly. And she's struggling, and then she tags her in. The crowd goes wild. Baker comes running in, and they're like, here comes Baker, and then just starts wailing on everybody, and everyone is screaming and cheering. It was that great, it was almost like this cinematic moment. You know what I mean? It was that classic moment that happened 30 years ago of the struggle, the tag. She gets in, the other wrestler charges, high energy, huge. Another great moment that was it was this part where the combat club or something.
The Blackpool Combat Club. Yeah.
Yes, poor Kenny, right? He's got his butt kicked. He's laying there. He's like all tied up, and the guy pulls out a screwdriver, an actual flathead screwdriver. I couldn't believe that. And they were talking about the screwdriver was in like a turnbuckle.
Yes. In a previous episode, I think it was Bryan Danielson attempted to stab him in the head with the screwdriver, and he dodged it, and it hit the turnbuckle, and they left it piercing the turnbuckle there.
Okay. So I thought it was like, did they have this thing sticking out, and they were trying to slam his head into the turnbuckle to impale and kill him, or like what was going on? But anyway, I was floored. So another great moment was he was approaching him with the screwdriver. He is going to impale Kenny. It's over. It's lights out. And he's like, it's time for you to get fixed up on the inside. You know, it was like all super hardcore. And then all of a sudden, the crowd goes wild. You don't know what's going on, but the crowd is cheering. And here comes the savior. This wrestler guy comes flying in and like, here he comes. Oh my gosh. And it was another like that classic save moment. You know what I mean? Where he comes in and he saves and he stands in between him and he holds him off. And he's like, no, like it was just like that. It was like that moment in a movie, like, you know, Avengers or something where it's all dire. Everything, they're all going to die. And then suddenly, boom, here comes the hero, you know, that just charges in and saves the day. And I just remember those moments when I was a kid watching it and seeing it again, those same moments, you know, being recreated. It gave me chills. I was just like so pumped up. I loved it. So I will say, if you're out there like me and you haven't watched wrestling since like the glory days of like the 80s or maybe the Attitude Era, as you educated me on, you know, in the 90s. Yes, thank you. Go back and check it out. That wrestling is still what you remember it to be. The characters have changed. The outfits, they're kind of similar, you know, some of them, you know, haven't changed, but the essence of it, the soul of it, the excitement, is still there. And oh my gosh, did I geek out. So I was geeking out. I was watching it on my phone and then watching it on the computer. Again, I was watching it digitally, not on cable. And I was like screaming, like I was like, oh my gosh, like it was a great flashback for me. So again, I'm looking forward to also watching WWE versus AEW, because there were some things about AEW that, even though it had those great soul moments, I have a couple little things that seemed a little off to me with AEW, and it had to do with the wrestlers. Some wrestlers I absolutely loved. Some wrestlers, now, for example, Jungle Boy, right? Jungle Boy. Yeah. Here's one thing that kind of blew my mind. Was they have this great intro for AEW, right? The music is like hard. It's like you're listening to like Guar. You know what I mean? It's like AEW.
I think I know where you're going with this. Yeah.
Yes, and then all of a sudden, like, and it starts now, and then it's oh whoa 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 whoa, like it's like the theme song from the Listerine commercial. From like, I don't know, 10 years ago, and everyone's waving their arms, and here comes Jungle Boy wearing like a t-shirt and sweatpants.
So, yeah, I mean, I could see how without context that
right.
was a bit of a moment for you.
Right.
This might be a good time to just briefly explain to you one of the core story pieces that is happening right now.
Yes.
The four pillars. What are the
four pillars?
The four pillars.
Okay.
Tex, are you familiar with the four pillars?
No, on my notes I put, what the fuck is a pillar?
Okay. So a pillar is usually a column that holds up a ceiling. No.
Yes,
geez,
right.
Luis.
Perfect.
So early on in AEW's history, AEW started in 2019. It's a very young promotion. I think it's entered its 5th year now. It's I can't remember who said it, if it was a journalist or someone cut a promo, but somebody referred to 4 young wrestlers who were at the time unknown, but were all signed to AEW from the start, that were predicted to be the future of AEW. We've got our big stars that we hired. We hired Chris Jericho. We hired Jon Moxley. We hired Kenny Omega. These 4 are the pillars that are going to hold this promotion up in years to come. And those 4 pillars were named as MJF, Sammy Guevara, Jungle Boy Jack Perry, and Darby Allin. And so in a perfect world, we would have started this podcast maybe 2 weeks ago when they first started this Four Pillars storyline. But essentially, we're at a point right now where MJF has had the championship. He's the first pillar to really kind of make good on the prophecy, so to speak. He's been world champion since November, I think. He's had a very dominant reign. He just came out of a brutal feud that led to their last pay-per-view, and now they're at a point where they're like launching new storylines. And the storyline that they've decided to go with is that it's time to address the Four Pillars. It's been sort of a background story for years at this point, which is one thing that I think AEW does extremely well, is that they will take an idea and they will let it marinate for a long time. They do not feel rushed to get to it. So this is a thought, the Four Pillars, that has been around since I think 2019, but 2020 at the latest. And they're now saying they're doing a story where MJF holds the belt and the other three pillars say, hey, it's my turn. We're ready to collect. And so this has been sort of a story that's been developing for the last couple weeks, 2 or 3 weeks. I don't know exactly. But they really kicked it into high gear this episode, where they essentially defined that, yes, there is going to be a championship match, a Double or Nothing, that you and I will see in person involving the Four Pillars in some way.
Right.
I'm so now
This is with coffin drops, Darby. Coffin drops.
Darby Allin does the coffin drop. That's his move.
I saw the big sign. I heart coffin drops. I don't know what that is. That's his big move.
So Darby Allin's shtick. Now, Darby Allin, I'm not a Darby Allin guy, but I respect him immensely. He's not the kind of guy that I go nuts over. He's not my cup of tea. But I got one of my childhood friends who we used to go to wrestling shows that we talk about this stuff with. That's his guy. So like he's a really popular guy. And his whole thing is he's a little guy, so he's never going to be the toughest guy in the room, but he's not afraid of anything. And when you watch his matches, the abuse he will put himself through, I will be shocked if this guy is wrestling in 10 years. He does crazy, crazy stuff. And his move, the coffin drop, is essentially where he goes up on the top rope, turns his back to the wrestler, crosses his arms, just jumps and falls backwards like a trust dive, basically, onto the wrestler behind him.
You're kidding. Oh my gosh.
And sometimes he'll do it onto the outside of the ring. Like he'll go off the top rope to the outside of the ring. So
oh my god, that's like a Dracula type move. Like that's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, that's cool. Like and that's a thing where Jungle Boy, I was like, who's this guy in like a t-shirt and sweatpants? But when I saw him wrestling later, I was like, okay, all right. Like he seemed legit.
Yeah. He is. Yeah, I think all four pillars are talented. I would probably rank Jungle Boy fourth. And
right.
I think that this was really interesting for me in a way that probably you two aren't going to connect with, because I feel like I'm really familiar with these guys. I have watched almost every episode of AEW Dynamite and Rampage, and I have a few more to go that I'm working through right now.
Right.
So I know these guys pretty intimately, I think. And so Jack Perry, for the longest time, didn't do a lot of talking. So mic work is new to him. And I think that he's doing fine for where he's at. My critique of this opening segment was, first of all, AEW generally doesn't do a talking piece for their opening segment. That's a WWE.
Oh, really?
That's a WWE move, and I didn't like that. Like if I'm being critical of this episode, one thing that I will wear on my sleeve about why I love AEW is that, generally speaking, they open the show with a killer effing match, and they didn't do that this week.
No, and I thought this is what they did. In fact, one of my criticism is like, I'm pumped up, I'm ready to go, and these guys are like talking. They're like, "You used to be a skateboarder." Oh yeah, well you like. And by the way, the trash talking seemed a little personal. Like it wasn't like they were attacking them personally. Like you were sleeping in your car, and now here you are. Like I was these guys, easy.
These guys have all had feuds with each other for years, and they've been feuding against each other actively for the last few weeks. So yeah, you're coming at this a little. You're walking into the movie 20 minutes in. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly. Right. Right. But I did like, but again, when I saw them wrestling, the Spanish God, he had the big feathery jacket and all that. But then when he was doing the wrestling, I was like, okay. Like he's had some good moves. He knows his stuff.
Yeah.
Same with Jungle Boy. I thought he was a great wrestler. I didn't get to see Coffin Drops.
Yeah.
But you're right.
But I
Go
think
ahead.
probably next week you will, because we're going to see the tournament continue.
Yes. But I will say the one guy that I flipped out over, who I absolutely loved, and let me make sure the name's right. I'm not sure. Is MJF?
MJF, Max.
That's the other pillar.
Friedman. Yeah.
That guy is amazing. He is the epitome. That was like the second he spoke, I was like, yes. He's got the charisma. He's got the build, the pop, the like. He's that instant villain that you love to hate. Like I loved MJF.
Dude, he is like 27 or 28 years old. He is already a front runner for greatest villain of all time in wrestling.
That's awesome.
It's crazy what he's been up to. Tex, I'm going to let you in here. I have so much more to say, but thoughts on this opening segment, thoughts on the 4 pillars, thoughts on MJF.
All right, so when I started this, first of all, I want to say, well, seeing how excited you got when the show started, that's awesome. It's fun because seeing how cool you liked it. I thought it was an okay episode. That opening promo was bad. Until MJF showed up, none of them could talk. It was clunky. My skills were bad. But when MJF came out, his mic skills are just on a whole nother level. He's a star. And I have it on my notes. So it's just a matter of time before he's the biggest star in wrestling.
Mm-hmm.
It's just,
Yeah.
I don't. It sucks because I haven't seen him actually wrestle yet. Because this is only my second episode I've been watching, and I'm so excited to finally see it.
I gotta say, there's a good chance you won't see him wrestle for some time. He notoriously does not wrestle often. I wouldn't be surprised if his next match is at Double or Nothing. He might not wrestle until then, which is unfortunate. But he doesn't wrestle very often. That's his thing.
Yeah. And a real quick thing, just to what Texas was saying, I'm really impressed by these athletes that there's so many different factors and levels. You have to be a showman. You have to act really well. You have to speak very clearly. You have to have charisma. And then you also have to get in the ring and have the stamina and the moves and capture the crowd. There's so many different layers to being a wrestler that you have to hit all of them.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about MJF and why he's so good is he is a phenomenal person on the mic. We all know that after seeing him for 10 minutes on the screen. But he's also a really good wrestler. Like, he backs it up in the ring. And he actually, at the last pay-per-view, I hope that you guys get a chance to go back and watch it. He had an Iron Man match with Bryan Danielson. An Iron Man match is a match that lasts 60 minutes, and whoever gets the most pinfalls in 60 minutes wins the match.
Oh, wow.
And Bryan Danielson, I mean, you saw him on the screen. And you saw him with the screwdriver. He is one of the best. He's a veteran. He's a legend. He was in WWE. He was a WWE World Champion. He's one of the greats. He's one of the great wrestlers of all time. And he is known for, like, he loves pro wrestling and he hits hard in the ring. So the fact that MJF went toe to toe with him for more than 60 minutes, because it went to overtime. Spoiler.
Wow.
He can back it up. Now, I would rank Sammy Guevara as the most talented wrestler of the 4 pillars, and you saw a bit of that later on in the show when he wrestled against Jack Perry. They're all good wrestlers, though. But yeah, to your point, and this is like, if I was critiquing this episode, my main criticism of this episode is that it had a shaky start, which I think dampened the energy of the crowd compared to what it normally is in an AEW show. So I'm glad that you thought that the crowd popped and they were loud, because they were, but usually they're much louder. And I think that it had to do with, they started with Darby Allin and Jack Perry, both of which are okay on the mic, but they need some time and probably shouldn't have been opening a show on the mic.
Right.
I think you're going to be much more happy to see them on the mic halfway through a show or after a match, or, that sort of thing. And that's
you need to lead strong. You need to lead strong.
That's one of the reasons why I'm such a strong believer in opening with a big match. Just gets the energy up. And, the
Yes.
I mean, people love that when he comes out, right?
Right.
Like everyone gets excited to do the thing.
Yes.
And he's a fan favorite. So I could see why, if you never saw this before, that was weird, considering your context for that song is, like the 80s and Listerine commercials. As
Yeah, it was like swinging on the vines, like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean?
But
it seemed counterpoint.
Yeah, so he used to come out for years. He was a tag team wrestler with another wrestler you saw later on in the show, Luchasaurus.
Yes.
And they were called Jurassic Express, and they used to come out to that song. And
Yes, in fact, I wrote down Luchasaurus, super scary, looks like the bad guy from Stranger Things. Like from the latest season, he looks insane with the mask and the beard. I was like, who's that guy? Like, he looks really hardcore.
Yeah, he used to play kind of like a lovable version of that character, believe it or not. But he has taken a much darker turn as of late.
Oh, definitely. He looked really, really hardcore. On the flip side, I want to talk about Commander real quick.
Yeah.
Now, Commander, to me, his outfit doesn't match the name at all. Because when I saw the Commander with the white, with the horns, he looked ridiculous, I thought, personally. But so I didn't like Commander. When he first came, I was like, okay, what is he doing here? What is this Commander guy, right? But I loved his wrestling, the agility of this guy, like bouncing off the ropes and doing all the flips. Like, is he considered a high flyer?
I would definitely say he's a high flyer. He's I don't know a lot about him because he's a very new acquisition by AEW. Actually, both wrestlers in that match, Jay White and Commander, are both very new to AEW, but they're both very well known where they come from. So Commander is a luchador wrestler.
Yes.
I'm not sure if he comes from AAA or whatever, which is a Mexican promotion, but I don't know. I never knew about him, but from like things I read, people who know about him. So he was a known quantity coming in. He's not a nobody. But yeah, he's you're going to see a number of these guys, especially in AEW, but these sort of luchador high flyer wrestlers. It's part of that style. And
he was awesome.
And AEW, sorry, go ahead, Tex.
Jay White, I haven't really seen him wrestle before. He seems so sloppy, and it might just be his style, but he personally seemed real sloppy. Especially his crossroads at the end of it, where it wasn't even grabbing the neck; it was all the way over it. I was like, ugh.
Yeah, I think that match seemed a little rocky, and I don't know why. I know. So just for context, Jay White is the former world champion of New Japan Pro Wrestling. He held the title, I think, for like a year. So he's a very well-known quantity, and everyone thought he was going to sign with WWE, but for some reason he signed with AEW. We don't know why for sure. There's a lot of speculation, but I've only ever seen him wrestle a handful of matches when he's been on AEW before representing New Japan, and he's been awesome. And a lot of people say he's really awesome. That match did seem a little awkward, and I don't know. Part of it was, I think that they're both new to the promotion, so they don't know each other or the promotion. And I wonder, I don't know Commander, but I know with several Mexican wrestlers, there can be a language barrier. And if they're improvising large parts of the match as they're going through and having trouble communicating, that could lead to it. I don't know. But I did notice a little shakiness that I didn't think was bad, but I didn't think it was up to Jay White's standard from what I've seen before.
That's the thing. Like, I was always told Jay White's, one of the top guys, and whoever got him, AEW or WWE, he's going to be an instant star. So I was going into the match thinking, oh, this is going to be a barn burner, and it just wasn't quite there. And it might be right. It might just take him a few minutes, few matches.
Yeah, I don't know. I agree. I think both of those, they're very talented wrestlers, and I think Commander did some awesome high spots.
Oh, dude, that guy was unbelievable. He had these high kicks and flips, and he's bouncing and jumping off the ropes. And I didn't actually know he was like a luchador. Like, that makes perfect sense. When I hear Commander, I'm thinking like Army Commander. I expected some guy coming out in like some kind of uniform or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that kind of thing, you know?
And here's the other thing that I think you need to like know about AEW versus WWE, for better or for worse. You can have different opinions on this, but AEW, generally speaking, takes wrestlers in as they are. They let them,
Nice.
They let them keep their names. They let them
Oh,
keep
wow.
the persona that they've built in their professional independent wrestling career. They let them keep their costumes. They even they don't actually have like a dedicated writing staff. They let the wrestlers pitch their ideas.
That's
and
awesome.
ultimately, Tony Khan has the final say on what the story is going to be, and he books the matches. But they largely leave it up to the wrestlers. It's an old school approach that the WWE does not do anymore.
Wow.
And so it's a for better or for worse thing. And often, especially, and you'll see this, speaking to promos, they also don't really script promos. They have a gist of what needs to be said, and they leave it to the talent to say it in the moment. Whereas WWE used to do all those things were once upon a time true of WWE, but they've since gone to a point where when you join the WWE, they're going to give you a new name that they own. They're going to give you a new story. They're going to give you a new costume. They're going
Right.
to tell you what to say. You hear that they even script lines, like word for word what you're going to say.
Right.
And I don't know how true that is today, but that certainly has been true in the past, to the point that there's flubs on the internet where you see where somebody flubs a line and they get really confused the way somebody would when they've lost their spot in the script, and you can see them trying to remember.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. So there's pros and cons to either way. WWE benefits from a much more polished show, and
Yeah.
AEW is a lot more gritty, I would say. But this is one of the reasons why I'm in that camp. I like the gritty, and I like the idea. To me, I'm kind of more about, I want to see what this wrestler, I don't know. To me, it's like songwriters versus singers, right? Like,
yes. It's hard though, because it's just more pressure for them. Like Jungle Boy, I think if he had a script, if he had some scripted sayings or things, I think that would have gone better. You know what I mean? At the
do you know
top.
who his dad is?
No.
The late great Luke Perry is Jack Perry's father.
What?
Yeah.
No.
So maybe a script would be good for him. I don't know.
Wait, from 90210?
Yeah. Yeah.
You're kidding. That's his son. His dad is. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Brenda, Bren, I'm doing cocaine, Bren. Maybe they need to insert a cocaine. I shouldn't say it. That's terrible. That's awful. That's awful. But
it's good promo for our new podcast, 90210 quotes.
it's exact. Now, I may have watched an episode or two, maybe. It was back in the day. But I have another quick question too about. Well, now we can move on to another topic, but at some point I need to ask you about Jericho. But this can wait.
Well, let's. Any final thoughts on this opening segment, Tex?
No, like I said, the mic skills just went great. MJF was great.
Mm-hmm.
I could see with Sammy. I feel like he was like just a little off of the other three. I think he seems to be the next one.
He's actually, in my opinion, really good on the mic. I think that there was just, I don't know if you guys have done much performance in your day, but certainly when you get on a stage and it starts off rocky, it can be really tough to correct the ship. So, overall, it's not how I would open the show, but we're also like, this was a very plot development heavy episode. There was compared to a regular Dynamite episode, I would say there was a lot fewer minutes put into actual wrestling than what is typical. It did feel like a bit of a departure, and I think that just sort of has to do with where we're at the upswing. We are right at that crux where it's time to start really pushing towards Double or Nothing. What are the matches going to be? Who's going to fight who? We need to lay this groundwork so that by the time May 28th rolls around, people are invested in every single match on that card.
Right.
So
and it's Spanish God, man. MJF paid off the Spanish God.
Yeah.
Wrote him a blank check.
So, okay, this is a good thing to pivot to. What do you think's going to happen? Do you think, so the deal is, I'm going to give you a blank check. He wrote a number on it. The only person that saw it was Renee Paquette. And the deal is, I'm going to help you win this tournament so that you can be at Double or Nothing with me. And in return, when that match starts, you are going to lay down and let me pin you 1, 2, 3. Now, there's no way that that's what happens in this story, right? Like, there's no way that you and I are sitting there going into 3.5 hours in. The big match comes up.
Here it comes. Can't wait. Right.
That's not
and he just falls over.
So the question is, what is going to happen? Are they going to get duped? Is Darby going to win? And it's Darby versus MJF. is Sammy lying? Is he gonna take the money and still wrestle anyway? Or did he, I mean, like this, my question is, did he even write a number on that check? Did he write something that like is super crazy that none of us would think of, that is not actually money, but like some sort of like plot device on that check?
That's a little conspiracy, a little bit. Do you think he wrote Pepperidge Farms remembers?
This is why I'm into things like wrestling and World of Warcraft, so I can like
Right.
exercise reality in the real world, and I can limit my conspiracy theory garbage to fantasy.
That's awesome. That's awesome. No, but that's a good question, because there's no way he's just going to lay down at the beginning. But I'm really looking forward to seeing MGF, and I completely agree with Tex. That guy, he's got it. He is an absolute star, and I was just floored by how many layers and how good you have to be be a star. There's so many different levels of wrestling, of being great on the mic. Like it's tough gig.
So let me ask you guys this. You saw, okay, we've got this 4 Pillars tournament. We saw Jack Perry's been eliminated. We know that, I don't know if it's next week or 2 weeks from now or whatever, Darby Allin and Sammy are going to fight for the spot. What do you guys think is going to be the main event of Double or Nothing, which is an interesting thing to call right now, versus, and maybe it's the same thing as, what do you think should be the main event of Double or Nothing?
Tex, what do you think, buddy?
So I watched last week. I cheated, and it seems like they're pushing Darby Allin. So I would expect that's going to be maybe Sting somehow gets involved if MJF does. So I think that's what's going to happen. I do like the idea of Sammy actually laying down in the middle of the ring and letting him get pinned, and then maybe like CM Punk come out afterwards, have an impromptu match or something. Just something like, or he goes to lay down and they do the 2, then on the 3rd one, Sammy kicks out, and then they have a real match. Would be interesting. But I expect Darby Allin's going to be your headliner.
What do you think, Koltrane?
Yeah, I think the thing that really floored me, that I also really enjoyed, was there were a lot of surprises. There were a lot of like twists and turns of wrestlers coming out of the mat, like the Outcasts or whatever. These are the bad guys. By the way, they literally they like maced somebody in the front row.
That was so Britt Baker and Adam Cole are partners in real life, and Britt Baker is from Pittsburgh, where the show was. So they always love Britt Baker in Pittsburgh, no matter what. Whether she's a babyface or a heel, they love her in Pittsburgh. She calls it Britsburg, and and by extension, they love Adam Cole. So I believe that those people in the front row were either Britt's or Adam's parents.
Oh,
like
that's
I
hilarious!
think they were in on the show, like kind
right?
Because
they still got maced.
Times. Yeah,
they did. They kept going back to them. Yeah, I was like, wow, like this is really, AEW is hardcore. You got flathead screwdrivers and people getting maced in the front row.
Yeah, it was spray paint. Their gimmick is that they spray paint green on people, which is kind of an homage to the old NWO thing, or hey, people who don't like it will call it a ripoff. But
that's awesome.
It's a thing.
I wanted to say too, and this is just a side note, was I was really impressed also by the female wrestlers. Back 30 years ago, it was mainly male wrestlers. And it was really, they brought it, and I thought they were amazing. Like they were incredible. I was really impressed by them.
AEW's done a really good job, especially in the last 6 months to a year, of building up their women's roster.
Yes,
I think it still is a way to go, but they have a really good bank of really good players to put on some great matches.
Yeah, and what's with the glove? The doctor, she put on the glove, and the crowd went nuts. What does the glove mean?
So she's got a finisher. Oh, the name's escaping me. Chat will help. I know Iron Grudge will help me. What's Britt Baker's finisher? Anyways, it's a finisher that many wrestlers have had over the years, but Mankind used to have it. He called it the mandible claw. But the idea is you're going to put your hand in someone's mouth and push until they submit.
Is this the lockjaw?
Is it called the lockjaw?
No, somebody had a lockjaw move.
I can't remember what she called. I don't know. I know any other day I know this instantly, but
right.
No, it's not, Chad. I'm not going to repeat that. The
Nice try.
The
Yes.
anyways, it's her finisher, and like
D&D, right? Is that her?
DMD. Fun fact: she in real life is a practicing dentist.
Oh, what? Wow. Okay. Which makes sense why her move would be the locked jaw.
Yeah.
Because she knows teeth.
Yeah, her other finisher is the curb stomp, which she delivered. You saw that at the end, right? Like, I think that's how she won the match. I think
I think she won it from the lockjaw. I have.
Ruby tapped, I think. Was it
Right.
Ruby?
She goes, I said D&D or DNT. She did the lockjaw and won it. And then also, I think Hayter actually got hurt. I think that if you notice at the end.
Yeah, I was wondering about that, if she actually got hurt. That looked her hit on the stairs looked bad.
Yes.
And she did not come back into the match after that moment.
Exactly.
So I was wondering if she got hurt.
Jungle Boy slammed into, I think it was Jungle Boy, slammed into somebody else hit those same stairs. Or maybe it was a member of the Elite or something, but they had their whole arm like taped up. Like, I think those stairs were pretty hardcore.
So in real life, one of the members of the Elite, Matt Jackson, has an arm injury. He's wearing a brace. The fact that he was taking big hits last night tells me that he's probably recovered or almost recovered. Like, I don't think he would be willing to take those moves if he was seriously injured still. So
yeah, and that was awesome because that's the one that saved. I think it was Takeshita. Is that his name?
Takeshita. Yeah.
Takeshita. He's awesome, by the way. He's the one that charged the stage, and then he kind of stood with the Elite, at the end and raised their arms. So I guess he kind of joined the Elite now or something like that.
Tough to say. The Elite is a deep storyline in AEW. It's probably like one of the biggest. I mean, those guys have been integral in most of the main storylines in all of AEW's history.
Gotcha.
So I almost feel like we should put them on since they're not the main focus of the story right now. They're sort of a B story. I almost feel like we should put them on hold for this week and see how that develops a little further.
Can I just say one thing about them? Before the other guy came out, what a dumbass move. No, I mean, there are 4 of them going to come out to the ring and only 3 of y'all. And you're going to try to pick a fight and get whooped.
Well, in fairness, they came out to speak. They were scheduled to come out to speak, and then Bryan Danielson showed up on the screen.
Bryan Danielson, he had a good part because Omega said, I don't know what to say. I just want to put a challenge out here, whatever.
Yeah.
And Danielson's comeback was great, and they were trying to pick a fight. It's just I don't know why.
I don't know. It's I don't really know how to dig into it without going off on massive tangents right now.
Sure.
So I think that that is a story that is going to develop further, but I think we saw a weird plot point in a bubble this week that I think will hopefully make more sense next week, if that makes sense. But the short story is that the Elite and the Blackpool Combat Club have been at odds with each other for a while. The Blackpool Combat Club sent both Nick and Matt Jackson to the hospital a couple episodes ago. Not for real. It's like a storyline reason that they took him out of commission for a while because he had his arm injury. And now they're beating up Kenny and the Screwdriver. So they're trying to really up the intensity. And I think we're going to see a showdown between Blackpool Combat Club and the Elite at Double or Nothing. Now, what form that takes, if it's a trios match or two separate matches, like a tag team match and a singles match, I don't know. But I think that's what they're going to build towards. And the Blackpool Combat Club is an interesting faction because they have only recently become like a heel faction. They used to be everyone's favorite.
You're kidding. They seem like the bad guys.
Yeah. I mean, they always did, but everyone thought they were badass. But now they've sort of but they were fighting people that people didn't like, so they were de facto baby faces. Now they're fighting the Elite, which the Elite were a heel faction, but because of the real life drama and them being suspended and coming back, everyone's really supportive of them, the audiences right now, so they don't really get to be a heel faction anymore because they're beloved by the audience. So it seems like both groups are taking a pivot right now. And I don't know if it's always planned that way or if it's reactive, but that seems to be what's happening. Okay, I know we're running out of time here. Let's jump to Chris Jericho because that was my favorite segment of the night. The Adam Cole versus Chris Jericho
Yeah.
absolute beatdown of Britt Baker and Adam Cole getting handcuffed to the ring, and
Yes.
I just love the opening where Adam Cole, total babyface mode right now. I just want to say, I grew up watching you. I respect you. You're a hero to me. My gimmick's based on you, man. Like, I just want to get that out of the way. And then classic Jericho. I appreciate you said that because I have no respect for you at all.
The crowd goes crazy.
I don't like giving Chris Jericho all this love. That was the best part of the whole episode. That had me cracking up. That was great.
That was amazing. And Jericho, he's great on the mic. You know, the second he started talking, he's got that force, he just that volume, and I thought it was, and I actually thought that Cole guy, I thought he was also great. I really liked him too.
Yeah, Cole's a big up and comer. I'm guessing he's gonna at some point be fighting MJF for the championship. He might even be the guy that dethrones him one day, depending on if they can build him up big enough. Because MJF's gonna have to drop that title at some point. But Chris Jericho is, and we're gonna have this debate, Tex, just not tonight. But Chris Jericho is, in my opinion, the GOAT. He's the greatest wrestler of all time.
You're wrong, but okay.
Yeah, we don't have enough time to get into it tonight. But he's in his 50s at this point. He's old. We don't know how much longer he's going to do this for. He's definitely not as good as he used to be in an actual match. But he's sharper than ever on the mic. He's been a top guy for 25 years, whether he was in WCW, WWE, New Japan, and now AEW. He's been around, and he's always awesome. And he's the master of reinvention. He recreates his character all the time. Sometimes they make fun of it. But right now he's playing a heel. And I like Chris Jericho when he's a heel. He's got his faction, his gang, the Jericho Appreciation Society.
Yes.
And
JAS.
The JAS. And they wrestled. Some of them wrestled later on in the night against the Acclaimed, including my favorite member of the JAS, Daddy Magic Matt Menard. But yeah, they're just, Jericho is funny, and there's a shtick to him. A very, I would selfishly call it a Canadian shtick, but he's cheesy and he likes to be funny. Like, there was even a fun part where Adam Cole called him the lamest burn ever, a stupid idiot. Do you remember that? Adam Cole called him a stupid idiot. Well, that's what Chris Jericho calls everybody. He calls people a dumb idiot or a stupid idiot. And Chris Jericho is the only person that can make that burn sound good. Like, he's like, you stupid idiot!
Right.
Because he's really good at being a heel, like a cartoony heel. And he did it like, first of all, what did he say? I am not, what did he say?
A jagoff.
A jagoff, right? Like, yes. Which, of course, the whole audience goes,
Jag! It went crazy, right?
I am not
yes. And you're talking about Jericho reinventing himself. He looks straight out of the 80s. Like if he's changed his look or something, he looks exactly like from the 80s brought to now. You know what I mean?
He's changed his look a few times over the years, but he's a rocker. He actually is he's a front man for a rock band that You're kidding. They tour, and
that's awesome.
Yeah. So yeah, that's him. And
I liked Jericho. I thought I was going to ask, my first question is he always the bad guy? Is that who Jericho is? But you're saying this is a new thing.
It's a new thing, but here's the thing about Jericho that I've seen several times in his career, and I haven't followed his entire career, but he typically is the bad guy, but people love him so much that they start cheering for him at some point.
That's
in
awesome.
which he has no choice but to become a good guy because it doesn't even make sense. And then that plays out for a while, and everyone gets the satisfaction of cheering for him, at which point he does a really nasty turn, does something awful to somebody everybody loves, and becomes a bad guy all over again.
That's awesome.
And that's basically the cycle of his character.
That's great. So Jericho is like, he's royalty. He's wrestling royalty in that he's been doing this for so long. A lot of wrestling has been built on his shoulders. He deserves respect for who
I
he
think
is.
so. And he
Yeah.
originally signed to go with AEW to let. Basically, he's kind of at the end of his career, and he talks a lot about where he's at right now. As he's trying to, obviously, he wants his moment in the sun, but he's trying to build other people up. Like he's got this. This is his second faction in AEW that he's had of people that started out as relative unknowns that he's trying to give opportunity to, trying to build them up, trying to give stage time
That's awesome.
to them. Now, you're going to have haters that are going to say that's all BS. That's just what he says, and he's really selfish, and he steals the spotlight. But I got to
You've
say,
been listening to Jim Cornette, haven't you?
well, Jim Cornette will say that. Well, let's not talk about Jim Cornette today. But the people that talk about him who work with him have very kind things to say, and the general word is that he is one of the locker room leaders at AEW and was super clutch during all the drama when CM Punk and the Elite got suspended. He really stepped up and was a leader behind the scenes.
That's awesome.
So I'm a big fan of him. He's a super cool guy, yeah, I hope he sticks around for a few years. And if he can't wrestle anymore, I'd love to see him manage. He does some announcing. Like I don't ever want to see him leave the industry.
Yeah. That's awesome. Well, it was great for me to finally see him. I've always heard the name, you know what I mean? So it was great to see him present, and I thought he had that charisma, he had that presence, you know what I mean? And to learn too about what a legend he is. That, again, that's a household name that I've always heard, you know.
And I'm sure we're going to see episodes that are going to feature him in the JAS a lot more, and we're going to talk more about Chris Jericho. I thought it would be good to focus on the 4 pillars this week because that's the main focus of the main event. We never did get around to final predictions. Just real quick, what is your prediction for the main event? Oh no, you said Did you guys both said Darby?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't. I guess I just didn't get to me. I think.
Oh boy.
Fatal 4-way. All 4 pillars, the tournament will be invalidated because Sammy is cheating.
Oh.
I don't know exactly how they'll get there, but we just saw Jack Perry get falsely eliminated, right? He got punched by the diamond ring with MJF, so he didn't lose fair. I'm going to predict that Sammy's going to win again against Darby Allin, and MJF's going to help him get the win. And somebody's going to step in somehow. I don't know exactly how it's going to go down, but they're going to say no. This is BS. We're not going to have a main event where you lay down. All 4 of you. It's going to be a fatal 4-way, the 4 pillars. And also, I think that, one thing luxury AEW generally has that WWE doesn't always have is that their pay-per-views are much more spread out. So they do have the luxury of saying, what is the best event that we can think of for our main event? And let's build to that. We've got the time. And I think that the best event, if you're going with this 4 pillars storyline, if you're thinking like now is the time to deal with the 4 pillars storyline, then the best event is a fatal 4-way, possibly eliminator. I don't know, between all 4 of them in Double or Nothing. Now, whether or not that's like some sort of cage match or not, I don't know. I think I'd prefer just to see a regular match, but yeah.
That's awesome.
So we're gonna end it there. We're running a little late. Last thing I just want to say real quick, we're going to watch Dynamite again. We're gonna talk about it again. We're gonna see what stories develop. We're gonna see it. What I'm most interested about next week, Colt, from your perspective.
Yes.
Well, I'll talk about you and then Tex. I'm interested in how any of your opinions about any of the wrestlers change. Like, what if Jack Perry comes out and cuts a great promo next week? What are you going to think?
Right. Right.
Or vice versa, right? Like,
yes. Because I liked Jungle Boy when he was wrestling. I didn't like the opening stuff with him, but when he was wrestling, I was like, okay, this guy knows his stuff.
So it'll be interesting because like you have these 2 hours that is your entire way to go on, and over time you're going to start to like see where things average out, so to speak, right?
Right.
And like, so it'll be interesting. And Tex, I didn't anticipate this, but it's actually been really fun with you because you don't watch this program. So even though you don't have the 30-year hiatus, I'm also interested to see, I know you like MJF. Most WWE fans do like MJF because they all think he's going to go to WWE next year. But we'll talk more about that later. But I'm interested to see who you like. And we didn't get to spend a ton of time on it this week because this is a very Colt-centric episode. But next week, I kind of want to put you on the spot and make you give us a few wrestlers that you think are actually pretty good in AEW. And you don't have to BS me if you don't have any, but I think you can. And I'll even throw you a bone and let you tell us who you hate as well, because I know you want to.
There's one quick thing that I got to say. I need to apologize to both of you. And this is something I think for anyone out there that hasn't watched wrestling, that when you hear, basically what was happening was Shoe Boots and Tex were talking a lot. We were like, in Discord or in voice chat, and they were saying all this stuff back and forth with all these different wrestlers. And I'm like, this sounds insane. Like, what are you talking about? Like all these different wrestlers. It sounded crazy to me. It did. It sounded nuts. But now that I've watched it, now that I've seen it, now that I had those chills in those moments, I am totally hooked and I'm into it now. And it's an interesting thing to come from the outside to be hearing all these, the Elite, and then the Combat Club. I still don't even have the names right yet. You know what I mean? The Dr. Baker and stuff. She was a dentist who throws down the lockjaw. But now I'm so into it. So I want to apologize if I ever made any comments about how ridiculous wrestling sounded, because it did on the outside. But after watching one show of AEW and WWE, I think might even be better, Tex. But after 30 years, I'm totally into it. I'm totally into the shows. It's got those exact same moments that were there 30 years ago that are still alive today, and I'm totally hooked. I'm totally into it, so it's great.
Cool. So I know life is busy, so it's not that I anticipate or expect this would happen, but you are now free and clear to go peek at WWE if you want to at some point, and you can let us know if you do. But we won't assign any WWE watching till after Double or Nothing.
Awesome.
So I think we're gonna end it there. I'm gonna just get the show ended because we've went on too long. So guess what? Good news, bad news. The good news, I got us an email address.
Woo!
If you want to send us mail, you can email us at wrestlinglosers@gmail.com.
Wow. That was available, huh? That was available?
Interestingly, Wrestling is for Losers was not available. So
that's awesome. Perfect.
So wrestlinglosers@gmail.com is the email address. Please send us your messages. We didn't get any messages this week, but I had several people message me in various forms of social media telling me they intend to message us. So
that's awesome.
So hey, beat the rush and make good on your promise. But yeah, I think are we back to our Sunday schedule next week? Is that right,
yes.
Koltrane?
Yes.
So we're going to be recording at our usual time Sunday next week. I probably 8:00 PST, but I will tweet out if the specifics. But until then, I think that's going to do it for us. Colt, Tex, thanks for a great time, and I hope you like this week's episode, and have a great vacation, Colt.
Thank you, appreciate it. Thank you again. Right. This was great.
Until next time, rather. Later, losers.